Hello, Trojans. Thank you for joining me for the next in my We Are SC interview series. Last week, I sat down with Dr. Amber Miller, Dean of the Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences. We had a great conversation about her career as an experimental astrophysicist who studies the Big Bang, about the pandemic's impact on faculty research and teaching and student learning, and about something close to both of our hearts, sustainability. Thank you, Amber, for joining me for the latest conversation in my We Are SC series. For those of you who don't know Dr. Amber Miller, she holds the Anna H. Bing Chair as the 22nd Dean of Dornsife College, and she's a faculty member in the Department of Physics and Astronomy. Amber is also the first woman to serve as the Dean of Dornsife College. You may know that Dornsife is our largest and oldest of the USC schools, and it functions as the academic core of the university, offering courses and advancing knowledge across the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences. With nearly 40 academic departments and programs, Dornsife currently has nearly 10,000 students and a faculty of approximately 1,000. Before Amber joined USC in 2016, she served as the first Dean of Science at Columbia University. Her academic career has taken her to top research universities around the nation. But when she came to USC, she was actually coming back home. She grew up right here in Southern California. We'll talk about that a bit later. Though her experience is as an experimental astrophysicist, she's also interested in public policy, in sustainability, in helping leaders outside the USC community have access to the experts that are inside the university to collaborate on complex problems. It's wonderful having you with me here today, Amber.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with something that is on all of our minds, and that is COVID. You're the dean of the largest school here at USC, and this past spring, you and the faculty and the students had to pivot on a dime, faster than I ever could imagine possible. Can you tell us a little bit about how you and your team adjusted to that rapid pace to go online?
Boy, it was quite something, as you well know. Dornsife is like a university within a university. We have undergraduate education, graduate, professional. We have research, operations, administration. What we realized right away was that communication was the key. So we immediately started meeting with my senior leadership team every single morning. I started meeting with my chairs and chairs of my faculty council every single week. And then each of my senior leaders started meeting with their counterparts in your central administration and with others at other schools. And then when we would come together every morning, we would all compare notes and figure out what to do, and then come back out and try to communicate it as quickly as possible. And this was the only way we had a hope, because every time the WHO, the CDC, the city, the county, or the state would change something, we had to move this entire aircraft carrier that was SC. And, I'm sure, for you, it was 10 times that. So it was quite the thing.
Well, I was so impressed with people, with the faculty and with students. This is a funny question, but do you think it was harder for students or for faculty to actually make that big change?
I don't know. I think it was hard for everybody. I think the students and their families did a tremendous job of pivoting and being responsive and being responsible. Our faculty worked so hard. And some of the things that came out were really enlightening and encouraging. Some of the things, faculty are trained to be sensitized and interested in that surprising or unexpected result. It's that thing that makes them think, oh, I didn't think that was going to happen. That leads to the biggest breakthrough in the research mission. And so I think when something like this happens, it's painful and it's very difficult, but it also sparked a lot of creativity. And, right away we saw things like, a sociology faculty member realizing, oh, wait, we're reading books written by people I know all over the world. Let's just Zoom them in and they can talk to the students. And then we had other faculty realizing they could pivot and start working on things that had a direct impact on the pandemic itself. So, a lot of really heartening stories, as well as a lot of frustration and confusion.
I'm going to come back to that about how they're using their research strength to address COVID, because I know that's something that's been really important to you. Before we get there, though, I want to talk a little bit about the breadth of the arts and sciences. So you have so many disciplines at Dornsife. How do you think the best thinkers tackle change, not just change in COVID, but just the changing landscape in higher education right now? Do you find that they draw from the strength across the institution, or are people primarily working within their departments to tackle these big changes?
I think it's all of the above. People tend to think of researchers being siloed, but what I find is that actually is so far from the case. When we did this interesting study, and I can't even remember anymore why, but at Columbia, at some point, I wanted to ask the question of how interconnected are the relationships between our researchers around the world. And so I had someone just pull publications for 1 year coming out of, this was just our science division alone, because I was running the science division, but I can't even imagine if we'd done it across the entire school. And we just put it on a map and said, let's just connect all the papers that were written by somebody to around their collaborators in the world. And it was a spaghetti diagram. And, then we looked at it internally to the university. And again, the connections are just spectacular. And I think because of that, our faculty are very nimble thinkers. They're very creative thinkers. And they're the kinds of people who just very automatically, they have these big networks and they reach out to across the networks very, very quickly. So I see that happening all the time. I think more than almost any other industry I can think of, we have people really relying on their colleagues and reaching out, which I think is just terrific.
Well, I think to some extent, when you have a big experiment like COVID, it may lend itself in some ways to the tools that a lot of researchers have, whether they're researchers in the humanities, the social sciences, or the sciences, or whatever. And of course, you've been all of those. You've been and still are a teacher. You still do research and you stay connected to it. And now you run this enormous, large institution. What are some of those transferable skills that you think you've developed in each of those areas as teacher, researcher, and administrator that have really served you in COVID? Because I think they're the skills that we want all our students to get through their education.
Yeah, I think the most important one is building a team that you trust, giving them enough freedom and flexibility to do their jobs, and then making sure they're people that you love working with. And, I had this experience starting as a researcher when I wasn't running a group. And then as I started to grow and realize the more you do, the more you have to do. And, leading a research team while also teaching, while also trying to come up with your own creative work, if you don't get really good at building your team and letting them each do their thing, then all you're doing is playing whack-a-mole all the time. And, in a job like this, I think of executive leadership jobs as trying to tip the balance between being able to spend time on the big picture strategic stuff and then playing whack-a-mole all the time at all the things that are coming at you. And the stronger your team and the better everyone works together and the more prepared they all are, the more time you as the executive leader get to spend on the strategic stuff, not on the whack-a-mole stuff. And so when COVID hit, having thought a lot about that, because I love working on the strategy and I love the team dynamic. I just love working with my team. Mm-hmm. Having poured so much energy into that really helped tremendously, because when you have that strong team and then the whack-a-mole just gets so intense, that's all you can do, you're able to get it done. And I think that's probably the thing I would say to our students. And when I do talk about leadership, that's the number one thing I stress is learn how to figure out how to identify those people you can trust and then bring them in and trust them, let them do their jobs.
That is really great to hear how you think, Amber, because one of the things I've noticed that in spite of all the whack-a-mole issues coming up in COVID and all the other things that we're facing, you've been a very strong advocate that we can't forget our core mission of creating new knowledge and discovery. And that's been something that I think you've been even urging the country to think about that. You wrote a wonderful op-ed on the Hill where you were talking about how COVID financial fallout could put America's intellectual property at risk. Can you talk a bit about what you're concerned about, this lack of focus on research, and how you think we need to keep our eye on not only our educational mission, but that major research intellectual growth?
Yeah, this is something I've really been thinking a lot about. You know, when most people think of universities, they think of the places where we send our young people to be educated, and they are that, absolutely. But they're also the places where the fundamental discoveries were made that underpin almost probably every gadget you've ever touched, every computer you've ever worked on, every airplane you've ever flown in, every new idea that's ever been created that's changed the world. And I think because sometimes it takes time to connect those fundamental ideas to the societal outcome, people forget. And the conversation today around higher education is so focused on the educational mission that I really worry that if we lose sight of how important the research mission is over time, we won't continue to invest in it. And that article came out of, actually, it was one of these days I was having a really hard day and I had 20 things on my mind and I was exhausted. And I just thought, if I just go work out for 20 minutes, I'll feel better. And so I put on my podcast and I went tromping up the hill. And two of the things that were on my mind were a bunch of our researchers had been expressing their concern and frustration that their grants were going to run out before they finished their work. And where was the money going to come from? And at the same time, we were facing what we were worried were going to be really devastating cuts. And I was worried I wasn't going to be able to bridge that funding. And then at the same time, another thing that was going on was we were figuring out how to manage the administrative overhead associated with a bunch of new regulations coming from the federal government about intellectual property. And I put on the podcast and I started listening and I realized they were talking about the first stimulus package and all these industries that were so important that they were getting support. And the research mission was nowhere. And I was just like, wait a minute. Here's the thing, I was thinking about the airlines, right? The research universities built everything that allowed airlines to happen, GPS systems and computer systems. And now, here we were not really even in the conversation. And so I thought, there's an audience in DC that, maybe could really benefit from hearing, look, you guys are thinking about the security aspect of this, but you're not thinking about the bigger investment aspect of it. So that's where that came from.
Well, it's a great point because I think even when we talk about research, people often think of it can have a very long time frame between a great idea and a very usable product. But even now we see that sometimes those are actually very short time frames. And that again emphasizes the importance of research even right now in the middle of the pandemic. I think there have been some pretty interesting studies that you've been supporting through Dornsife, where faculty are working on things relevant to COVID right now. Can you tell us a few of those?
Yeah, sure. So, almost immediately, our Center for Economic and Social Research that's been running a poll called the Understanding America Survey that many of our listeners may have associated with the USC Dornsife LA Times Daybreak poll, the one that started hinting that Trump might actually win the 2016 election. They do so much more than that, but they recognized that they could potentially help, especially here in LA City and LA County, where we didn't have enough testing, we didn't have enough information. So they immediately went out into our LA Barometer survey and started asking a bunch of those questions. And then the county came and said, oh, wow, that would be incredibly helpful. So that's become a collaboration. And that's been enormously valuable in understanding a lot of the aspects of what's going on. And that's then turned into a new project that's actually being run through our public exchange office that's looking at food insecurity in Los Angeles. So, one thing comes to another. We also have researchers working on therapeutics and on testing. We have folks looking at COVID symptoms and what order they tend to appear. And then we have people looking at things like race and why is it that some people are given more attention when they go to the hospital and are looked at differently. And how do we manage that so that the hospitals can then figure out how to de-manage that, right? How to make that not happen so that everybody gets appropriate and equal treatment.
Well, we'll come back to that research at Dornsife because it's incredible, the depth and breadth of things that people are studying. Another issue, though, along with COVID that I think we're seeing when people talk about higher education is, of course, the cost of higher education. And especially now when people are feeling that financial burden, I think they very much want to be able to get their degrees and pursue their dreams and that opportunity, but they're worried about the cost. I know that that's a big discussion right in your school as it is across USC. And yet one of your big focal points, I think, has been to raise money for financial aid. Can you talk a little bit about how we support our students and how we can continue to do that at this moment of such great need?
Yeah, absolutely. This is critical. We in Dornsife raise funds for scholarships just like the Central University does. But one of the things we've been really passionate about is not just raising money for general tuition scholarships, but really recognizing that one of the problems is in the experiential learning aspect. So we have this incredibly rich array of experiential learning opportunities, and students that can't afford to participate in them then don't have an equal experience, and that's not okay with us. And so we've really been pushing our donors and asking them to help us fund things like study abroad programs, research laboratory experiences, internships that may be unpaid, and so but the students can't afford to just go and do that all summer. Service learning in our community. We have a new Agents of Change program, the Joint Education Project. We have things like the Fisher's Fellows program that was endowed by Sam Fisher several years ago that gives students stipends for exactly these kind of out of classroom experiences.
I know that I wouldn't be sitting here if someone had not given money so that I had a grant as an intern when I was a student at UC Santa Barbara. Never had an idea about what research could be till someone gave me the support to be able to go into a lab and learn from someone. I know that quite a few students are doing that sort of learning in Dornsife, and it's happening in all the areas. Are we effectively able to support the students to do that, or is that something that you want to see grow in the future?
Yes and yes. We are supporting an enormous number of students to do that, but we are growing the programs. So our goal, as we put our new team in place over the last few years and are really rethinking some of the aspects of undergraduate education, is we want every single student to have at least one and hopefully more than one experiential learning opportunity. And so as we expand that, we of course need to expand the support for it as well.
That's fantastic. I'm excited about that and can't wait to see what they produce. Can you tell us a little bit more about the breadth of research and the big disciplinary areas in Dornsife that people might not know about?
Yeah, so we have almost 40 departments, as you said. We have hundreds of researchers and PhD students and postdocs. So, I almost hesitate to pull out a couple areas because someone will say, but you didn't talk about mine. But I can say that, two areas that where I guess maybe the way to say it is that we have many researchers across many, many different disciplines in Dornsife working in the same in some aspect. And so two I would just pull forward are health, broadly speaking, and sustainability.
Let's talk about sustainability. I know how much I care about it, and I am so excited because that's been something you have been actively working on at Dornsife since you've been here. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on and, what does it mean when you study sustainability? Is it just about saving money on green energy, or is there a lot of other aspects that go into what a real program in sustainability means?
Oh, it's so much bigger. Yes, we will save money. We will save lives. We will save ecosystems. When I think about how do you build a program in sustainability at a place like a university, it is so broad. So we have started. Sustainability is one of the areas that we've addressed this way. It's not the only one, but we started by just collecting up, what is everybody doing? And so we just went out and said to our faculty, tell us all the stuff you're working on. Then we put it all in buckets. We have hundreds of faculty who are working in some area of sustainability. And then we think about the educational piece, but I'll just talk about the research for a minute. So, a lot of times people think about sustainability on the research side being about building new battery technologies or new solar technologies, and it's that. And we have some just absolutely cutting edge things in that area. But then we also think about, what does it mean in terms of getting people to adopt new technologies and to think in new ways? And so then you get into behavioral science and sociology and psychology and economics and political science. So then you start pulling those people in the room and you say, okay, well, what are all of you working on, and how do we knit this together? And then you have the narrative aspect, so the storytelling. And so how do you get those people to come and work with all of you? So one of the really exciting things that we're doing to try to pull this together is we have this terrific thing called the Wrigley Institute. And we have an amazing laboratory out on Catalina Island in this pristine, beautiful place. And the island has been used for student outreach and for research laboratories and for outreach to the community. But over the past, decade or so, it's been really marine focused. And that's good. I mean, we've got a lot of great marine work, and we're not going to minimize that at all, but we want to broaden it. And so over the last couple of years, we've really been thinking about the future and the leadership, and how do we really raise this level and raise the awareness and make it really something that the world says, wow, USC's got this institute that's just the first rate, most exciting thing, and it's doing something different from what others are doing. So, what I've really been focused on is, how do you get that whole umbrella? So we just hired a new director, and he's just joined us. His name is Joe Arvai, and he has an undergraduate degree in ecology and a master's degree in oceanography and a PhD in decision science, psychology. And so he is perfect. He really, he understands what's going on there already, but he can bring in this broader area. And he's super excited about coming in and really working with everybody to pull, not all of sustainability in Dornsife, but a big piece of it together. And he's a super collaborative guy. And, I know he's really excited about working with our professional schools also, as am I. That's part of what drew me to USC, is just, this place is different in some ways than other universities, and there are opportunities there.
Well, I think sustainability is going to be one of those great unifiers, because everybody is working on it in their own way. And we're very lucky that there's been so much work going on in Dornsife in these ways to bring people together in a very interdisciplinary way. And it makes me think about another big question in higher ed. People have been talking about campuses as to whether we're actually able to talk together anymore. Have we lost the capacity for reasonable conversation? And I know that can be exacerbated when you're living at home and you're on a screen, or you're going through the troubles that people are going through now. And I know that you have a very important Center for Political Future that tackles that issue. Can you talk a bit about that for us, what the mission is of the center and how it can help us develop a case for making reasonable, strong conversations about tough issues?
I would love to. This is one of my favorite things that I worked on over the last couple of years. When I arrived, I discovered that one of the best democratic strategists in the nation, Bob Shrum, was working here in Dornsife teaching a class. We had a center that the leadership of the center was turning over, and I was thinking about what was coming next. And I realized he was sitting here. I thought, well, he would be a great person to ask to lead it. And everyone said, oh, no, he'll never take that job. I said, well, can you just ask him? And so I called him up and he said, okay. And he came in and he did all these just tremendous things, really bringing in our students. He loves students, and he really loves getting them talking about ideas. And then we started thinking about, well, how do we make this bigger and give it more impact and a broader reach? And we both realized that one thing that's so important is you can't just have a Democrat. You have to have a Republican too, because you really need that across the aisle conversation. And Bob knows everybody, and he's been in this business forever. So we started tossing names back and forth. And then this name, Mike Murphy, came up. And again, he said, oh, I don't think Mike will be interested. And I said, let's just ask him. And so he did. And Mike said yes. And the two of them are just absolutely terrific. They both run presidential campaigns. They've run gubernatorial campaigns. They've worked on Senate with senators and with Congress people. They know everybody. And between the two of them, they know everybody across the aisle. But the key is they're friends. They like spending time to each other, and they rib each other, and they are not at all afraid to take each other on in a big way intellectually. And that's what I love, because that's what universities should be doing. And so often now, because people are afraid to offend each other, and so many attacks politically have become so personal, they're not intellectual anymore. And the two of them are able to bring it back to, look, the rules of the road are you don't attack each other personally. The rules of the road are you don't dismiss facts. You work from the facts, and then you make your argument. And so they've built this just tremendous center, and our students love it, and our community loves it, and I love it. And they've been able to bring in, heads of state and senators and presidential candidates and members of Congress and journalists, and of course our own academics and our students and members of the community. And it just gets better and better. And they're partnering with the Wrigley Institute. And so we do this annual conference called Climate Forward, which is really about the politics of climate change, trying to get into the conversation, not about is climate change happening, but what do we do about it? And that's, we missed it this year because of the virus, but if it doesn't happen again, we'll do it online.
Well, I'm a big fan of their conversations too. I always love to turn them in, and I'm hoping to have an interview with the two of them as we get close to the election. So I think that would be fabulous. Before I leave conversation about Dornsife and ask you a little bit more about you, I know another aspect of the Dornsife work is that you have incredible creative arts in Dornsife, together with our amazing professional schools in the arts. Can you tell me a little bit about that? For example, I think we have one of the best creative writing programs in the country. A little bit more about that, I think it'd be fantastic to share.
Yeah, I'm not a big spouter of statistics, but when it comes to our English department, we've got a Pulitzer Prize winner, we've got 2 MacArthur Prize winners, 17 Guggenheim Fellows, 23 fellows of prestigious academies, and that's just getting started. It is just an incredible place. And, there's no better way to learn to write than from people like that. But of course, you then hear all of those accolades and you think, oh, that all sounds very intimidating and impressive, and they probably wouldn't want to hang out with our students, but it could not be further from the truth. And this group of folks is some of the most diverse and fascinating and warmest and wonderful and dedicated colleagues and teachers I've ever met. And every student I know who's landed there has just had an absolutely terrific time. So yeah, and that's just one of our creative departments.
I'd love it if we can talk just a little bit about you. You have a really interesting field of study. I want to ask you a little bit about what it means to be an experimental astrophysicist. But let's start with what brought you to USC?
So, I have lived my whole career in research universities, and that excellence and dedication to new ideas, and that was critical to me. That was a precondition. But I wanted to do things like build this new program we have called Public Exchange. And we can talk about that a little if you want, but I wanted to do things that were different, that really changed the game. And USC is a place that I felt was ready for that. It has the excellence both in research and in teaching, but it's also open to innovation and change. It's dynamic. It has the professional schools. It has Los Angeles. And I just felt like it was a kind of place where I could do something different and I would be appreciated for it, both with our faculty and with our administration and with our community, in a way that some of the places I'd spent earlier in my career maybe weren't so enthusiastic about that kind of innovative change.
Well, I'd love to hear about that public exchange, because I think that is something that's very exciting, and it's sort of the opposite of what people think about the ivory tower. And that's what you've been really trying to develop in Dornsife, and clearly that's something that attracted you here.
Yeah, so my goal was really to think about, again, this idea that people are forgetting about the research mission. And why are they forgetting? Well, because they can't touch it. They can't feel it necessarily. They don't know, they can't access all this expertise. But living inside the walls of the university, I know how much capacity there is. So it was really a question of where's the disconnect? How come our business leaders or our city or our county government aren't calling us up all the time and saying, how can you help with this? And so we spent a couple of years really digging into that and asking what's hard about that. And there are some things that are hard about it. We work on different timescales, we work in different ways. And so what we've really been dedicated to doing is building the kind of connective tissue that allows a one-stop shop so that someone on the outside can pose a problem and come to us and say, hey, we really need some help with an economic question or a political question or a question in psychology or in race relations or, one of these difficult things. And we can say, okay, great, we will find the person who really knows the answer. And we will build, you won't have to worry about the contract. You won't have to worry about the timeline. You won't have to worry about the project management. We'll get you the answer.
Wow.
And we'll get it for you in the way that you need to digest it. And then from the academic standpoint, they don't have to spend all their time digging out who they can work with and how they can work with it and how to write a contract. Someone just calls them up and says, hey, you have expertise. Can you help? And so that's what we've been trying to build. And, it's brand new. We're just launching it. But we're getting a lot of really good feedback. And, you were generous enough to help support one of our pilot projects. And we're excited. I think my dream is that this becomes the thing that the rest of the universities all say, man, we want one of those, just like the Tech Transfer Office happened. And then expertise, not just at SC, but around the world would become more readily available. So that's the goal. We'll see.
That's great. Well, I think we're going to get a lot of people writing and asking how they can join in on that now that they've heard about it a little bit today. Can you tell us just a little bit about your research as an experimental astrophysicist? That's pretty big picture stuff.
Yeah. So the work that we are doing is trying to understand what set off the Big Bang in the first place. So what happened in the first much less than a second of the history of the universe. And really that gets then at the underlying physics behind what created our universe, what is our universe. And that's, to me, that was, if there's any one question, one worth pouring some decades into. But I also had a really good time and I don't go into the field anymore, but working in the field. This type of science actually requires that you build your own instrumentation, and then you take it somewhere where there's as little oxygen and as little water as possible. So we spent a lot of time up in the high Atacama Desert at about 17,000 feet, and then down in Antarctica launching high altitude balloons. So also exciting, and now my students get to have the fun.
Well, I know you still even have a small lab, which is unusual, but I know that you are still keeping involved in your research, even though you've got many other things that are also keeping you busy.
I am. I keep a toe in. Most of the credit goes to my collaborators at this point because they're the ones running the projects now. So I just get to participate. But I do have 3 graduate students who are all doing terrific work, and it's really fun to continue working with them.
Now, Amber, I know this was coming home when you came back to California. Can you tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and if you would share a little bit about your family? I think we'd love to know about that.
So I grew up in a canyon way at the north end of Malibu. And this is, I think, probably why sustainability is so critical for me, because for me, it's personal. I grew up outdoors most of the time. If I was ever inside during the day, my dad would walk through and say, I can't believe I have a daughter who's sitting on the inside on a beautiful day. And so it was always like, go outside. And, we had animals, and I would fish little newts out of the creek and play with them and play with baby frogs. And the idea to me of it's not just about saving human lives, but it's about saving ecosystems. And because that's where I lived and I care about it. But then I went to public school in Santa Monica. I went to Santa Monica High School. It was a long commute, but I had it wasn't podcasts at the time. It was books on tape. And then I went to Berkeley, and then moved away for many years. So it's been fun to be back. And I never thought my kids, having lived so long away, it never occurred to me that my kids would be growing up here back in LA. And I was just at the beach the other day. I have a daughter now who's 8 and a son who's almost 2, and they were playing in the water and they were covered in sand. And it just made me so happy to see them living that life. We lived in New York City. I imagined they would be on the subway, not playing in the beach. So it's good to be back.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. And you have a big set of responsibilities and an amazing team that's helping you keep Dornsife really thriving. In your times that are really tough and you're not busy writing an op-ed in response to them, what do you do or what brings you joy?
People, my friends, my family, and my team. I know I keep saying that and it sounds silly, but having people to work with that make you laugh, even when times are tough, it's so critical. And then, at the end of the day, being able to come home and have my 2-year-old do something hilarious is, or my daughter give me a big hug. It's to me, that's where it is.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been great having a chance to talk with you, and we'll catch up again soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.